success will happen over time, not overnight. So, have a proper clarity on that and eventually work towards it.
On today's episode, we are featuring Sairam Gowrisetty, who is a replenishment analyst at a Fortune 500 corporation. Originally from Hyderabad, India, Sairam moved to Canada to pursue his master's in industrial engineering and supply chain management. His journey from an international student to an established professional is inspiring and a guiding light for all the international students and job seekers. Sairam is a career coach as well and is willing to mentor ambitious individuals who qualify for his time. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the exciting journey of Sairam Gowrisetty. Hi Sairam, how are you?
Hey, Alok, I'm doing fantastic. How about you?
I'm doing well. Things are getting normal in New York, so that's a positive sign. You're based in Canada, right?
Yes, I'm in Toronto, Canada, and yeah, things are getting better, I would say, and let's hope for the best.
Yeah. Canadians are known to be nice people, so I don't think they would say no to vaccines. They would be like, okay, instead of two, if you want to give three shots, I'm okay with that as well.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. In fact, the second dose, almost most of the people are almost scheduled, so it's all good. It's all going good.
Yeah, well, that's a positive sign. That means I can visit Canada in near future. So that's great. So, my first question to you is that you have a rather interesting job profile. It's you are a replenishment analyst. So, what exactly does a replenishment analyst do?
Great. That's a great question to start with. Even before that, I just want to tell you something. You're doing a phenomenal job with respect to these podcasts and so on. And these are adding tons of value to people out there because many people are stuck in their career, not understanding how to move forward and so on. And these podcasts can definitely add them some value on and give them some clarity on how to move forward and so on. And I've heard to some of the entrepreneurial journeys as well, so that gives great motivation to youngsters like you and me. That's great. So to answer your question, let me start answering with a non-technical way and then get into the technical. All right. So let me give an example. You just walk into a random retail store. You go to a particular aisle and you try to look for a product and it's right there, right? Ever thought how, right? Anytime you walk in, the products are right there because behind the scenes there are many replenishment analysts like me who is working virtually to make things happen, right? And we use certain things called ERP systems, which is called enterprise resource planning, which means we track the movement of the products in and out of the stores and so on, and eventually see if any product goes below the service level agreement. We kind of make sure we contact the vendors and the nearby warehouses to make sure the stock is again back in the store. So that's mostly, I would say, a replenishment analyst looks after the stock level maintenance in the stores for numerous lines of products. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I can understand that from my background, where I used to work with my family business, and they would have, of course, a lot of inventory stocked up because we are on the supply side of electronic goods, and so that has like certain companies have a minimum standard quantity of order that you need to place. So of course a truck is not going to show up for five televisions, no matter how expensive they are. So usually there is a certain kind of inventory that you need to track and plan, and you need to align purchase and sales. So I understand that, and I think it's great because the fact that the things that you look for pretty much ends up in a store nearby, like within 2 or 3 mile radius, is I think quite amazing. And that's one of the few things I feel retail has been very successful in doing, is that the convenience that it offers, even in an offline world, is that okay, even if you don't find something on Amazon, or if it's too far away or too expensive, you can find, preferably, like, with it within like 3 or 5 miles maximum. So it's
Right.
great. So that's interesting. Now, of course, we, like, just spoke about like two different kinds of supply chain, right? There is an e-commerce, and then there is retail, mom and pop kind of situation. So how does an e-commerce supply chain differ from a physical supply chain? What are some of the key differences?
Right, that's a very good follow-up question to what I just spoke. In fact, if I have to give one word answer to that, it's just the platform. The hassle remains the same for online or offline, but just the platform differs. But let me tell you, not just the physical and e-commerce. Now there is a new type of supply chain that's in the progress right now, which is predominant right now, which is called hybrid models. All right. Now, before even discussing these three, let me give you a basic understanding of what supply chain is. Now, the items or the raw materials come from vendor or the manufacturer to the warehouse, and then they move to distribution centers, and then they go to the stores. Now, a physical supply chain more focuses on the item availability at the store level, the endpoint, where the customer walks in and then buys the products and so on. Whereas e-commerce is focusing more on the availability at the warehouse level. Because when a customer orders a product online, the product need not move from the warehouse to store and then go to customer. It can directly come from the warehouse or the distribution center to the customer, right? So the major difference is on the availability at respective levels. Now, what is a hybrid model? The name itself tells it's a combination of two, right? Now, with the current situation in place, most of the bigger stores, they are planning to combine the store and the warehouse together. All right. Now, it gives the convenience to the customer. They can either walk in directly to buy the product, or they can place an order online, and the associates in that store or the warehouse associated with that, they will ship the product to the customer. So it's like currently people are moving from physical supply chain to hybrid, and then hybrid to the e-commerce. And with the current times in place, this transition is happening so fast. Within 2 to 3 years, we could imagine a complete e-commerce oriented supply chain within North America, I would say Canada and USA combined. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating, and it's exciting to see that now sort of these companies have awakened themselves to the fact that okay, they just cannot be the retailers, they just cannot be a retail endpoint, they also need to stock up. Because there are a lot of things, for example, like Nike shoes. Sometimes when they launch limited edition shoes, you cannot buy them because most people would buy it up in bulk and hoard them until like a couple of years later when their market value is really high. So sneakers have become this sort of underground secondary market these days, where people just buy it and store it for a couple of years and then sell it, rather than buying it for personal use or things like that. And yeah, I think well, I mean, usually I see Nike sometimes struggling with those things when they have a special edition shoes coming out. Then they are worried that okay, we need to make it exclusive, and that's why there's limited quantity. But there's also fear that it might fly off the shelf so quickly that it might not even reach the consumer that they were intending to in the first place. So I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, I think it's great that companies are now aware of that, so they can put out enough numbers out that okay, even though it's special edition, it doesn't end up being so scarce that its market value is virtually inflated. Now, I have a question for you. Do you think that small like really small business owners, for example me, right? Like, I am a podcast producer and I want to engage with my community. So for example, this is what I'm thinking, that I'm trying to produce a movies podcast, and once that is out, I also want to sell an accompanying popcorn that goes with it, because the podcast is named Butter Popcorn Podcast. uh, would do you think it's better for me to do the sales on my own, as in like ship the products on my own, or is it better to uh, partner with Etsy or Amazon to like take care of the entire fulfillment, and I just become the entry point for the orders?
Right, right. That's a great question. In fact, living in the 21st century, Alok, now we don't need to start things from scratch, right? Things are already in place. You imagine something that's already existing out there, all right? So now all we have to do is connect the right resources with the right inputs. So, as you, with respect to your question, you don't need to kind of take all the hassle on you. All you have to do is take a third party's help and get the things shipped out to your customers. With this, what happens is they bear the responsibility of it. All you have to do is pay them. Simple.
Right. Yeah. Well, so that's great. It seems like I found the perfect consultant for my products shipping and inventory management. So we'll talk about that after this thing is done. But
Sure.
yeah, I think yeah, that's it's so exciting that now when things were physical, people were looking for more like virtual online experiences, and now that majority of the world is online, people look for physical things. So in terms of podcasting or any like long form content online, people think like, oh yes, it's great to watch a series on Disney or listen to a podcast, but if I could own a piece of it, be in terms of like you know uh, something like a memorabilia or some merchandise like t-shirts or shoes or whatever, then yeah, people are just like so excited to have that as part of their experience. And so yeah, modern platforms have emerged to accommodate that, where like of course on YouTube you can go and have your video, but you can also have link below the description that says okay, you can just buy a t-shirt or whatever. So that's pretty cool, and I think I like the way
Right.
that is reshaping the understanding of how supply chains work, right? Because initially it was like supply chain goes from manufacturer to the retailers. Now it's like everybody can be
Right.
a retailer or a supplier if they want to be, and that's pretty cool. I feel that's a real innovation, that it empowers everybody to have their products out there. Now
Right.
I want to go back in time a little bit. You were a chemical engineer in India, right? You have a background in engineering.
Right. A little bit of engineering. Yes.
So, what prompted you to move towards supply chain?
Right. Right. Brilliant question. Many people have this in their mind actually, to see that how the transition happens, or even people whether to transition from one field to the other field, right? Now let me give a statistic. Okay. In an average literate individual changes their career at least 4 times in their whole lifetime. All right. This is with respect to 21st century, because yes, earlier times were a little different where people study one thing and work in the same field for the rest of their life, right? But the world is changing right now, so people need to adapt and evolve, right? I in fact personally have changed my career 4 times in my last 10 years. All right. So now, why supply chain? Okay, the moment I stepped in Canada, I've understood that supply chain is the backbone of this country, right? And there is a reason for that. The most of the products, either they should be going through imports or exports to be able to do a business in Canada. All right. So when there is so much of imports and exports happening in here, supply chain plays the major role to make sure and take care of that. Right. Let me give an example. In the recent times, we have all heard this news of Evergreen ship stuck in the Suez Canal, right? And it was stuck for a few days, but it has created billions of dollars of disruption in the businesses, right? So one ship stuck in a canal created billions of dollars of disruption. That's the power of supply chain. So it's very important. A country takes care of their supply chain model very well, especially the corporations, the big giants who are taking care of this. They kind of put all their efforts into it to make sure the process flows smoothly. So when I saw the potential, I eventually made that shift from industrial to supply chain.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I've been to Canada once and I've seen like that it's a heavily industrialized nation. So, huge manufacturing uh, infrastructure, and, lots of products are exported and imported, as you were mentioning. So it makes sense, right? Like, that if you have such a heavy reliance on how things move, then it makes sense to build a career in that. And yeah, well, it's exciting to see now that, okay, education is becoming more skills oriented, which means you're not bound by a particular industry and you can apply it in any manner that you want. And, you don't need to go far, but just look at the Indian Institute of Management. IIMs have, like, I don't know, 70-80% of the intake is just engineers, right? Because they understand the problem solving concepts and how to apply it to management problems. So yeah, and it's just I feel bad for commerce students because anyway they just like, in India they don't have like that enough of street cred, that leverage to brag, because, well, India still kind of
True.
covets careers like engineering and being a doctor or a lawyer and things like that. So it's that, unless you're a chartered accountant, then everybody loves you. That's like because you're saving them taxes. uh,
Absolutely.
so it's that. But yeah, I think that's pretty cool. And I myself have changed the industry, not my role so much. It has evolved now, but I mean, I began in finance and I still do majority of the finance stuff for my company. But I, as a co-founder, I also have to be now involved in the creative aspects of it. So which projects to green light, how do we produce and distribute it, things like that. But yeah, I'm glad that you took that leap and you chose to switch careers. And yeah, by the looks of it, I think it's going very well for you, so I'm happy for that.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Right. So now, since you are educated both in India and Canada, what do you think is, some of the differences between the way India teaches its population and the way Canada does?
Right. To talk about the differences in the education system, you in fact actually mentioned a word called leverage. Right. Now, well, both the education systems have some pros and cons. However, there is some leverage in Canadian education system wherein the universities or the colleges, they allow the students to either pursue internship or the cooperative education. They call it as co-op in Canada. Now, what this means is, let's say if there are 4 to 5 semesters in degree, now the university will allow you to work at least for 1 or 2 semesters in the actual industry or in the field, so that the person can gain the actual practical knowledge whatever they have learned in the college and school, right? Now this will add tremendous value to the individual's profile when they graduate and go out into the actual career search. So whereas in India, yes, there are some universities and colleges who offer this. However, it's not predominant, right? Now there are little changes that should be done because the traditional education is a little outdated, I would say. If you listen to any of the successful entrepreneurs right now, we talk about Elon Musk or so, they say the traditional education system is not necessary for you to become successful. I'm not telling to do a job, but to become successful you don't need an actual traditional education, right? That's pretty much.
Right. Yeah, and I think another interesting thing that is predominantly a Western concept is that, there's a lot of things that are reliant upon learning by doing. So not everything is set in theory. They only teach you enough to do your job well, and then a lot of it
Right.
comes from just applying those skills. Right. I mean, of course, I'm sure you must have gone through the business case model, which, of course, Harvard popularized, which they initially used at law school, and then business school kind of made it a standard thing. And so I kind of find that very interesting. Of course, there are case studies in India as well, but it's just that, there is so much of reliance on being able to retain the concepts rather than applying it, that a lot of times you don't get the worth of what you're paying for. I feel that's that. Okay, sure, you can, say the perfect definition of what it means to be, a replenishment analyst. But if you're not delivering results, then that's just a, that's not serving any purpose. So I think most of the people sort of get it twisted that way. And with Canada, yes, I love the co-op option that they have. In fact, one of my friends who did his MBA from McMaster's in Hamilton, Ontario. He kind of like,
Mhm.
really made sure that when he was applying to the university, he emphasized on co op that, okay, it is one of the differentiating factors about the Canadian education system, especially in business education. And I would love to, you know, uh, explore that because, yeah, well, in India, there is not much. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, my next question to you is, in your experience, what do you feel some of the what do you feel are some of the items that are difficult to procure? Like, most people think that it's easy to get them, but in reality, it's very hard to come by. If you could shed some light on that.
Sure, sure. Yes, as you mentioned, people don't realize how difficult it is, but sometimes it's very difficult to procure, especially the fresh produce, right? Be it the fruits and vegetables, right? Now, there is a reason why I'm saying this. Canadian climatic conditions do not allow or support the plantation throughout the year for the fruits and vegetables. So, for that, corporations either has to um, look into the greenhouse plantation or either import these fruits and vegetables from some other country. Now we all know how delicate the fruits and vegetables are, right? They can go bad within moments. Now I have a personal experience working in a produce company while I was pursuing my masters as a part-time associate. I exactly know how much of a hassle it is for someone to, move from a product received or a fruit received to the packaging and to sending it to the store. Any small mistake, they have to dump all that in the garbage, right? So now people just walk in casually to buy an avocado or a tomato or something like that, but it takes a lot of efforts behind to have that fruit or vegetable there in the right ripe stage, because you don't want to buy some rotten fruits or veggies, right? So there's a lot of efforts that goes behind to get the right quality and the right quantity in the right time and with the right standards. So that's what I would say. The fresh produce has been a hassle always to procure.
Yeah, yeah. And I always find it very interesting because I go to this local supermarket near my place, and they would have grapes in, like, the grapes that are plucked from, like, whatever that branches or whatever that thing is, and they put it in a plastic box, and it's a mix of like red grapes and green grapes and stuff like that. And you're right, like, it has to be at a particular stage where it could stay in that refrigeration for a certain period of time. And if you go wrong in planning that, then either you have to discard everything because it's a health hazard, or if it's too early in the stage of process, then it might be sitting on your shelf for much longer than you anticipate. And in supermarkets, when things need to move quickly, taking up that kind of shelf space even
Yeah.
for a week is, like, a lot of money that you would otherwise make by stocking some other product. So that's pretty interesting. Do you think that factors into your analysis of when to order and how much to order, in the sense that, okay, when it's fresh produce, that, okay, these are the average, you know timeline within which, these things are fresh. And so, I like, does that play a factor into your framework?
Absolutely. In fact, most of the companies just rely on the statement called freshness guarantee, right? So it itself has become as a value or a value proposition for the companies to make sure they succeed or they get better than their competitors. So, basing on the freshness, an analyst has to consider a lot of things even before plan that produce to enter the store or so. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that's why I find it difficult that a lot of online retailers are trying to, you know, get into this idea of, like, oh, we'll deliver you fresh groceries, right? Because, I mean, there's also this damage issue that, okay, you can put them into a car and deliver it, but if you are doing multiple deliveries, then there's so many things that could go wrong, right? The order could get
True.
exchanged, or like one product might flip into something else, like go into some other basket. And so yeah, it's a lot of it's not only like procurement stage that is, I think, tricky. It's also about how to deliver that. So yeah, I've never ordered groceries, so I don't know much about like how the whole process is. But I feel it's going to be some
Right.
time before I like become that lazy that, okay, I'll just like order it online. Maybe when I'm older, like 40 years later or something, then I'll be like, okay, I'll just
Yes.
order groceries online. By then it will be so advanced, I guess, that there will be like a chip in your brain that every time you feel like, oh, I need some apples, and it will just show up an hour later, like, here are your apples. So it's that.
You're right. You're right. In fact, people are going completely into automation, and who will not believe that in future, things will be ordered automatically basing on your body requirements? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, smart fridges these days can anticipate your grocery and your dairy requirements just on like how many times you open
Mhm.
and close and where you place your product. It's
True.
not a far-fetched idea that in 30 years there could be like a brain implant that just reads your synapses and says that,
Yep.
okay, this person is craving apple, so let me just place an order for apple. Yeah,
Right.
so it's that. Um,
It is scary and exciting at the same time.
yeah, yeah, it's like, well, I can see the utility of it, but then it can also be, used against you. So yeah, it's tricky.
True.
Right. So
Yes.
now I want to get a bit technical. So, there's something called ABC analysis that a lot of replenishment analysts use. What is it, and how do you use it?
Right. This is usually used when there are more number of items to be dealt with. For example, there was a time where I was dealing with almost 10,000 different item types,
Wow.
10,000 different items. Because working in the retail industry, you deal with essentials, non-essentials, and there are subcategories in each, like fresh produce, dairy, pharmaceuticals, anything. There are a lot more things, right? So now each different line of product has a different analysis to be done. Now, ABC analysis will let us understand on two factors. One is the control on the product. The second one is the records or the data that we have. For example, if an item is being sold at a very high cost, and then we need to be very careful at procuring them because we cannot overstock them up because they're very expensive. So you need to have a tight records or the strong records, accurate records. So I would say if it's a tight control product and an accurate record, we can categorize them as an A category items. And the B is like moderate. C are like it's okay. You can have a basic record set, and because they are less expensive, even if they stay on the shelf, it's fine, right? However, 80-20 rule will help big time in this process. 80-20 is nothing but 20% of the products will count to 80% of the sales, right, in a given corporation. So these 20% of the products are the ones that fall into the A category, most probably. So that's how ABC analysis will help an analyst to kind of categorize and kind of eventually work on the forecasting and procurement models.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That seems to be an interesting approach because for smaller companies, it's easier to for them to categorize because they can easily tell which are fast-moving products and high, value products compared to the ones that are, let's say, fast-moving products but cheap. So they can buy, like, they can overshoot a little bit and they can still get away with it because it's fast-moving. And yeah, I think sometimes people can go wrong, and when they just use instinct or they just base it on seasonal factors, that, okay, we feel we are going to have a good festive season, let's just have more stock. And I've seen that thing happen with my family business where we were over optimistic, and we felt that okay, during Diwali or some other festival season we'll be able to clear all of that stuff, but it doesn't happen for whatever reason, and then you are stuck with an aging inventory. So essentially then at some point you have to come up with your own offer that hey, if you buy this like nice refrigerator, then you might get the microwave oven for like 50% of the price or something, or things like that. So yeah,
True.
that's when we had to get creative. But I mean, if we had used that thing, then we would
Hmm.
have been a much better space. So I mean, it's much more complicated than that. It's not only
Absolutely.
of like about like not having data or analysis, it's also about like the company's minimum standard quantity, and like what kind of product line they have uh, planned, and what is the general perception of the brand, and things like that, and how much marketing
Right.
support they're doing on their own. So yeah, it's, well, I mean, it's different for every industry, but like for consumer electronics, which is again a high ticket, like high price item, it's tricky to plan the
Hmm.
inventory, because you can end up with like a lot of money that's tied up in inventory, and it's difficult to then clear, especially
Yes.
because sometimes companies just discontinue those models, so nobody wants to buy them because they feel service and
Right.
other things will be an issue. So yeah, it's exciting, but it's
Right.
also overwhelming from time to time. So yeah, ABC analysis.
Absolutely.
I'll keep that in mind. Right. Okay.
Right.
So what would be your advice to people looking to become a replenishment analyst?
Right. See, the best thing to begin with is to understand the business, right? There are n number of departments in the supply chain, and it will be overwhelming if someone looks at it and in the first stance. But if they understand what is the input and output of a particular department and where the data goes and so on, it will become easier for them. Now, I would recommend, or I have always guided some of the fresh graduates to start with some customer facing roles. It could be your order management, it could be a logistics coordinator or a warehouse coordinator or so on, so that they can understand what's happening at the basic level. Now, once they do that, they can eventually understand where their data is going out to, where their output of that particular department is going to, and how the other departments are using their data. And they should be in communication with other cross-functional teams as well, so that they will understand other how other departments work. Now, over let's say 1 or 2 years of time, when they keep on doing this, they will understand what is their forte, what is their comfort level, what is their strength, and eventually will move into that particular department and cherish there, right? So understand the business first and eventually go step by step. Don't aim for the analyst right away. Analyst is a third level or fourth level job, right? So you have to start with a representative or a specialist, or right, and then go to analyst, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think, sometimes people don't understand the need for career progression, and they just want to jump at a particular stage. And
Right.
even if they are able to get that job, they won't be able to be successful in it, because they have no understanding of, how to model demand and supply, and when to overstretch those thresholds, right? So, and that's a very valid point, because I remember when I first working began working for my family business, for first 8 months, and if I was coming from like JP Morgan, which is a really like intense banking experience that I was coming from, and I was just ready to jump into it from day one, like okay, if I could handle that kind of workload, I'll just kill it in my family business. And my dad was like, no, you're not doing anything like that as such. For 8 months, you are just like, understanding what customer needs. I'm like, 8 months? That's too long. And he's
Mhm.
like, no, but well,
Yeah.
we work in a very different market compared to JP Morgan. So you need to understand what you are getting into before you can start making estimates or assumptions
Right.
about how things go. And yeah, I think that was perhaps one of the best
Mhm.
business advice I've had, is that if you don't understand the psyche and the thought process of your customer, you won't be able to serve them what they need. And in smaller markets where business is more relationship based rather than transaction based, that becomes the differentiating factor, that how well you can service the client beyond the traditional ideas of business, right? Because everybody can give discount, everybody can say, hey, I can deliver it for you for free, but understanding that how people think about products will help you sell them better, in the sense that a lot of people are just looking for, like, the easiest options. It's like, hey, what's the latest television? And we are like, okay, go with this one. It's nice, 4K, LED TV, and people are happy with that. There are some people who are extremely choosy, where they would, like, compare features and price and quality and everything. So that they need a different approach. And so, yeah, I think, if people could invest that time early on in understanding the customers and use those insights to drive those their decisions when they become an analyst, then I think they will be much more successful rather than being overwhelmed into, like, trying to balance everything, right? As you said, because there are so many departments. So yeah, I think that's a very sage advice. And yeah, I would urge my listeners and viewers to follow this. And yeah, I think, that's a really cool advice. Okay. So now, of course, you
Brilliant.
must have heard about, how COVID led to a surge in demand for toilet paper and bread. And I've seen those things firsthand. The same local supermarket I spoke about, I saw, like, no breads and no toilet papers on the shelf. And then when I got some, I kind of, like, as a joke said that, hey, I can tell you the place where you can find toilet paper if you just give me $5. And nobody paid me for that, but it's just that it was one of those times when, like, people were hoarding baby wipes and hand sanitizer and all of those things. But apart from
Right.
these products which made it to news, how do you think COVID has affected demand for some of the other products that you see has seen a certain kind of a shift?
Right, right. That's a very nice question. In fact, that's the trending question everyone have, right? Now, international trade of non-essentials, right? International trade of non-essentials have taken a big hit because there were a lot of border restrictions, if you are aware, right? Movement of goods or people from other country to one country has been a big issue. Now, the first hit right after the toilet paper and the bread is the toys, because when the government announced lockdown, all the kids has to stay at home. Earlier, kids used to go out and kind of have some fun time and so on. Now, when kids are staying home, they are bored and they need some toys immediately to play with. They need some games, they need some entertainment and so on. So this suddenly has spiked the need for these toys and so on, and the corporations were not able to keep up to that level because they didn't expect this to happen. That was completely out of the blues, right? So that's one thing, and other non-essentials as well, which usually we know most of our products that we use in our home come from either Japan or China or somewhere, right? Now, some of the restrictions had stopped this transportation or movement of the goods. However, some of the giants who are like Amazon or so on, they're still able to kind of procure somehow and manage the demand and supply. But yeah, there are multiple non-essentials that have faced a big hit with respect to this, current COVID situation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think toys make a lot of sense because, kids could go out in the park and hang out with other kids. Now that's not happening. So, to keep them busy, parents would stock up on toys and keep them busy that way. What I'm seeing right now is, like, like Chick-fil-A came up with a statement that, okay, they have a sauce limit now, that for delivery orders, I think you can only have 2 packets or 3 packets, something like that.
Wow,
Because
that's it.
otherwise, yeah, I think there was a ketchup shortage temporarily also, where, like, a lot of brands were cutting down on giving how many packets of sauce they can give you, or ketchup. And that that just,
Right.
like, is all because, people are staying home, they're just ordering food rather than stepping outside. So that makes sense. And yeah, I didn't realize that, things are stocked only to a certain extent, and beyond that it starts creating this demand crunch. And so that has been quite surprising for me, that okay, well, toilet paper could be understood, bread could be understood, but sauce and, like, toys and all of those things were sort of came out of nowhere. So that was surprising. And yeah, of
Right.
course, all the memes tell you how much, like, how ridiculous it seems now because we are in this situation. Otherwise, like, we don't even care about sauce.
Right.
Like, there was almost like too much sauce. So
True.
now it's all changing.
That's right.
So that's great. Right. Okay. So now imagine that, okay, given the advent of cryptocurrencies and everything these days, imagine the organization that you work for starts accepting Bitcoin as a standard form of payment, in addition to, like, cash card, all of that thing. Now, the tricky part about that is that the revenue that you earn, right? That value itself is fluctuating every day. If you, like, for example, have Bitcoin, which is very volatile, how do you think that affects your planning when it, like, as a replenishment analyst? Because, well, you know now you don't know what's the price of the product that you thought was going to be. Like, initially, when it's just money, you think like, oh, it's like, say, $10 a piece. But now it's like, okay, if the product is also pegged onto a certain cryptocurrency, you're like, okay, it's $10 today, yesterday it was $7, next day it might go to 15, or whatever movement between them, right? So how much difficult uh, of a job does it make for you, or does it make it difficult at all?
Right, right. That's definitely a tricky one, and you actually stole my answer already, right? Now let me tell you this. We're talking about something that is invisible, untouchable, all right? So that is something just in the air or in the cloud, right? Now, for as you mentioned, it is completely dynamic in nature. One day you could be so rich, and one day you are completely broke, all right? Now, just basing on the value of a Bitcoin, a form of currency, if I plan my inventory, now if the rich guy turns into a broke person, he'll not be able to come into the store and buy my products. So that will be a huge loss for the corporation, right? So we have to kind of experiment a lot with respect to this. We cannot now come to a conclusion yet, because as this is still dynamic in nature and people are just playing around with this. Of course, some people are making fortune out of it, but some people are just losing tons of money, right? So at this point of time, I would say we cannot even imagine having that as a standard form of currency and plan our inventory basing on that currency, right? So for now we can still consider it as an additional payment method, but no analysis should kind of rely on that, as simple as that.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's a very valid point, and it has consequences both for customers using that as a payment as well as company accepting it. Uh, and I think what was surprising to me is, like, when Elon Musk said that, okay, we will accept Bitcoin as one of the forms of payment for
Right,
Tesla. I was like, okay, that's interesting. Like, how will you plan your production? How will you plan your demand if, like, the value of your revenue
right,
on your financial statement is changing every day, right? Technically. So
right.
it's like, well, I mean, sure, people say that about currencies as well, right? Like, okay, value of a dollar or a rupee or Canadian dollars move up and down every day. But
Right.
it's
Yes.
restricted, right? The stock exchanges have a certain threshold within which those fluctuations could occur. So nobody will become a billionaire or broke overnight. That kind of swings won't happen.
True.
So it was interesting to me, but then I just found that they stopped accepting that as a payment. And, well, just I just realized that, oh, it's a very smart um pump and dump scheme, in the sense that, okay, Elon Musk knows that if
True.
one tweet, one statement, and market goes crazy for crypto, so he's like, okay, we'll start accepting Bitcoin, and everybody is now bullish on Bitcoin. And then once it has had a certain appreciation, Elon Musk is like, nah, for environmental reasons we will stop accepting. And like, because the company
True.
has bought so much of Bitcoin, they made money. And so I'm like, yeah, well,
Hmm.
regulators need to look into that, because a lot of people are using this as a pump and dump scenario where they buy it in bulk, inflate the price artificially,
True.
and then at the high price point they just dump. So you have made money, but collectively a lot of other investors kind of
Yeah.
had to exit the market. So it's that. But yeah, I think it's fascinating. One approach I thought a lot of companies could do is, they could buy a hedge, in the sense like they could buy the equivalent number of gold, or some other currency which is more stable, right? And then use that to convert. Now it's a long process, of course. Like, first you get Bitcoin, and then you buy something else, and then convert that into cash. So we'll see how it goes, but certainly something that
Yeah.
I'm looking out for. Like, okay, how do companies model that behavior,
Right.
uh, especially if the volatility continues? All right. Okay. So, final question, and again, a bit technical one. And this is coming from my
Hmm.
experiences that, financial analysts use methods like FIFO and LIFO, which is first in, first out, and last in, first out, as inventory management models to make financial assumptions for a business, projections for future. So first in, first out is, for people who don't know, when a product that comes first into the warehouse is the first to go out. And these are the ones that are typically that have expiration date. So, like, fresh produce needs to go out, like the ones that you bought first. Whereas the LIFO is last in, first out. So the product that you bought last needs to go out first. And that could be seasonal products, like during you know tulip season. If you are a flower seller, then you want to sell tulips first, even though they were the last thing to be added to your inventory. So now these are the models that typically financial analysts use to make projections. uh, do replenishment analysts also use something along these lines? And if not, then what other models do you rely on? So of course we spoke about ABC analysis as one way to plan, but is there anything else that is
Hmm.
sort of behind the scenes and people don't know about it?
Right, right. That's a very important question as well with the current times in place. Now, working in the retail industry, will be dealing with numerous categories of items, right? As you mentioned, we deal with fresh produce, electronics, clothing, pharmacy, home care, entertainment, and kids section, refreshments, whatever, right? You name it. So now each category has a different and unique type of replenishment analysis that to be done. As you mentioned, fresh produce could be maybe for 7 days of span. Let's say if we have an apple in place, we have to make sure that its span is 7 days on the shelf or something like that. Example. Now, if it's a Coca-Cola or some refreshment drink, it can sit there. It can sit there for 1 year or so. So each type of the category that we deal with, the analysis changes. Now there are current times wherein the what do you call the demand changes day to day, right? When suddenly the government announces a lockdown, you suddenly have some spike in sales of certain items. When the government says, okay, we are cooling it off or maybe extending it further, then sudden another spike or so. So for this to kind of take into consideration, recently what we've been doing is considering the last 3 days of data, right? Most people usually look at like weeks or months or years of data, but with the current times in place, we're considering last three: how was the sales, what was the maximum, what was the minimum, what average we can stock up, and how much we can have in the warehouse. So, and some if something is repetitive in nature, if people are buying it a lot, we can use moving average as one of the models that to analyze. So as I mentioned, now these are completely dynamic times. We cannot fix to one particular model or so. So we can kind of keep on upgrading and evolving in terms of analysis, but most probably we consider the most recent data so that that can be more accurate and can help us plan accordingly and make it available for the customer.
Yeah, yeah. And that's such a valid point, because, now that there are such high swings, given, the decision of the government to extend or retract the the lockdown, 3 day or 7 day average makes much more sense than the entirety of historical data, because this is sort of once in a lifetime, once in a generation kind of event that we are currently facing. I hope it is once in a lifetime, because it would be hard to,
Right.
like, survive another one of this.
Wow.
So it's that, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because the demand is changing so quickly. 3 day or a 7 day moving average makes much more sense than looking at historical data, because of course that is going to be distorted or skewed towards more conservative estimates. Yeah, I think that's fascinating, and it's great to see that you have been able to help with this insights. And I think a lot of people who are looking to be in this industry or in your particular role, we have will have much more clarity in terms of what to expect and how to prepare. And so, yeah, I'm glad that you were able to give time to this and share some of your insights. Do you have any questions for me?
No, I mean, this is great. I mean, as I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, these are the kind of videos or podcasts or episodes that help and guide professionals out there, or the fresh graduates out there. And as you've been amazing with respect to interacting with many other professionals as well. I have heard a lot of podcasts that you aired earlier. So keep doing this, Alok, and this will help a lot of people out there. And anyone who is watching this video, make sure that you have some clarity about your career. Do not just go blindly, or just one of my friends is doing this, so I'll do this, or something like that. Develop certain clarity, understand the future, what the projections would be, how the career can take you to certain places in life, and eventually plan accordingly. And do not try to jump into various things. It's always step by step. Success will happen over time, not overnight. So have a proper clarity on that and eventually work towards it. That's it.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's very well said. Success hope happens over time and not overnight. And a lot of people want it the other way around. They want it overnight and don't want to work for it. So, yeah, that's just sad sometimes to say that people jump from one trend to another. So, like, okay, crypto is hot right now, so a lot of people are Bitcoin investor or like whatever. Now, if let's say in couple of years virtual reality picks up, then bunch of people will jump into that. And I don't know what after that, maybe robotics, and like people will jump into that. So it's that. And I
Right.
mean, I've heard so many people say that they became successful because they maintained their focus even with all the distraction that was around them, right? Warren Buffett famously said that it's the work ethic and your focus that matters. And he said, I chose to focus my efforts on finance. Bill Gates chose to focus his efforts on IT. And he said, even if we swapped industries, we would have still become billionaires. Not because, like, uh, of their knowledge as such, but it's the same core principles that you need to apply, where you have to understand what is uh, the essence of what you're delivering to your end consumer. And once you get that, then you will always be successful. And so he said that we just chose to focus in all of these things. We didn't get swayed away by seasonal trends or other things that were coming around. And yeah, I think you look at people and you see that it's the depth that counts and not the width. Width eventually comes. Like, nothing is stopping Elon Musk right now from having his own clothing line, right? Because it's like minimal effort, it's just slapping
Right.
his name onto a product and people will buy it. So it's that. But because he
Yes.
became successful in something else, his success in something else, like some other category, is virtually guaranteed because of the scale that he has amassed in one industry. So I think, yeah, very, very
Right.
valid advice, very wonderful advice. And yeah, I'm just happy that I could bring these
Mhm.
perspectives to people, engage into a discussion, satisfy my own curiosities about how things work. So I walk away much knowledgeable after each interview. But it's good to know that the same thing happens for a lot of other listeners as well. So yeah, I'm just happy to connect the
And
dots.
one quick thing to I know end up as well. as you mentioned some of the successful people stories right now, and one common thing in all of these people is they always have a role model or a coach or a mentor in their life, right? They always look up to someone. And in the same way, we cannot just go by ourselves to achieve something. We should always have some proper guidance or a mentorship that can kind of help us. What is a mentor? I would say mentor is someone who already have the fruit on the tree that we are looking at, that we are aiming for. So, for example, if a fresh graduate is looking for some advice or guidance, the first thing he or she have to do is to reach out to a person who is already successful in that arena. And I'll be more than happy to guide fresh graduates or so who are looking for some guidance, a quick 5 minutes call or a quick chat over Zoom. I'll be more than happy to do that because I've been through all the struggles of what they are going through, and I overcame them and eventually get to a position where it's going well. Now I'll be more than happy to understand what the situation is and kind of provide that my 2 cents so that they can kind of step up to the next level and move forward, right? But that's all I just wanted to, share with the listeners and the viewers.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think that's really kind of you to offer your time, given that, how crazy it must be right now due to COVID, where, job expectations and, responsibilities change pretty much every day, and you have to keep up. So I think that's really kind of you. And yeah, I urge everybody and I encourage everybody to reach out to him. I'll make sure that, you find a way to reach to him in the description or any other form, so you can look out for that and reach out to him. And yeah, I just had a lot of fun discussing all these ideas with you, and hoping that, once things settle down, we can catch up in person when I'm in Toronto. So yeah, that's going to be
Absolutely.
exciting.
Great, great. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Alok, and the questions were really interesting and very much relative to the current situations. So, been great time, spent with you and answering all these questions, and it's a great experience. All right.
Same here. Thank you so much, Sairam.